Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Lee Peterson. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. I also appreciate your emails. Thank you very, very much. Even those who disagree, thank you for letting us hear from you. We have a very important topic tonight that we're going to deal with, and I think it's important. I think all American citizens believe that this is very important. My guest is Sireen Sawaf. She is the Governing Relations Director of Muslim Public Affairs Council. MPAC is what it's called. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I absolutely appreciate it. I want to get in, first tell the people about your organization. What is its purpose?
Sure. MPAC, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, is a national organization that really strives to be a resource to opinion shapers and decision makers in the fields of government, media, think tanks, and civic and interfaith groups. And we also focus our energy on developing Muslim American leaders that can contribute to the country throughout generations.
Do your organization tend to lead toward liberal policies or conservative?
It's interesting because typically we lean politically towards the left because of what we derive from our faith, which is, the importance of the protecting human rights and freedoms and standing for the preservation of human life. And so oftentimes, war is typically a problem, especially when it's unjustified, or we feel it as though it's unjustified, as we've seen with Iraq.
So you think the war in Iraq is unjustified?
I think that there are several problems, and even members in Congress are saying that the American public may have been deliberately misled into a war that should not have been fought.
But is it better, though, now that we are there, that we would fight our enemies on their territory than allow them to come here?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think that from different surveys and different contacts that we've made with even people in Iraq, the hostility has now increased towards America compared to pre-war. The pre-war state. So, the notion that we're fighting our enemies over there before they come over here it doesn't really hold up, because we're actually, by going into a war that is seen by many as being unjustified around the world, and Muslim and non-Muslim, it has created more hostility and animosity towards America, and we're hurting our image, and really we need to really begin to think about how to better our image abroad.
I want to talk to you about the Pew Research Center survey, but let me just finish up on the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
It is true that in part we reacted rather than starting this war. We reacted to the attack on 9/11. We reacted to the attack September 11 when we were attacked by radical Islamic extremists. So we are defending ourselves for the most part. That's true?
Well, if you look at, there's no doubt that Muslims they were struck by 9/11 like the rest of the American public. We were attacked, and actually twofold, because if you look at the backlash and the hate crimes that spiked, according to FBI statistics, Muslims were hit twofold by the attacks, not simply because our faith was hijacked, people attempted to hijack our faith, but because also we experienced what followed. So, the horrific attacks certainly should not have been, swept under the rug by any means. The problem, though, is that the connection that was made between the 9/11 attacks and Iraq, and several congressional officials now are talking about the fact that we made decisions off of very poor information that was countered by several experts in the field, but yet the administration refused to listen to them in terms of, there being a very weak link between Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden, and so on and so forth. I think
all the evidence, and many governments believed across the world believe that Saddam Hussein had weapon of mass destruction. And I personally still believe that he had them. It's just that we waited too long before we went in, and which gave him an opportunity to either hide them somewhere in their country or move them out. I think we waited too long.
Well, according to the people that are talking about it now in Capitol Hill, they're saying that the evidence that was presented on weapons of mass destruction was very weak, and it was actually very old evidence, so it wasn't credible. So I'm not the expert. I kind of take it from them, what the experts are saying.
Personally, do you think we did the right thing, though, by taking out Saddam Hussein?
I think
he wasn't. Do you believe he was an evil man?
I definitely think Saddam Hussein was a horrible dictator that oppressed his people and definitely did not represent my community. Right. But I still don't know if it's justified that we did what we did. But that's my personal perspective. Right. I perhaps shouldn't be going into that too much.
I want to talk to you about the Pew Research Center survey, which highlighted over more than 1,000 American Muslims. There are many things that struck me by it, but the thing that concerned me the most is that 1 in 4 Muslims under 30 believe that suicide bombings are justified under certain circumstances. That's here in this country. Should I be afraid?
That's, okay, let's talk about the poll. And I think that, first, this is the first of its kind, the first poll that is actually surveying Muslim Americans. And I think we should look at it as overall a very positive poll. I mean, the headline of the poll is that Muslim Americans, middle class and mostly mainstream, yes. Which is, by the way, contrary to what many people have believed. The poll has prove that what we've been saying for so long, which is that the majority of Muslims in America are moderate, are mainstream, right. Are embrace American values, believe in the American dream, and alongside the fact that what we also believed, which is that the perception is that Muslim Americans have been targeted post 9/11. When we look at the 1 in 4,
let me just add right in there.
Sure.
There's no real evidence that, yes, you can find some incidents of Muslim Americans being attacked, but for the most part, there's not a lot of evidence that they have been attacked by American citizens here.
Well, it depends on what you're looking at as evidence. Post 9/11, the year following 9/11, the FBI's hate crime statistics revealed that there was a 1,600% spike in hate crimes alone that targeted Muslim Americans. And the county of Los Angeles, which is the oldest county that ever tracked hate crime statistics, also revealed an unprecedented spike. And of course, up until today, Muslims are facing hate crimes, and we're just talking about hate crimes on the national and even local level. So I don't know if it's fair to say that we weren't impacted. Perhaps we weren't impacted like other communities are impacted. Historically, the African American community has been highly impacted by hate crimes alone, more than any other community throughout history. So, it's definitely not a comparison, but I think that those are simply the statistics and what we know of people reporting. Beyond that, let me just add that we know, and both reports mention the fact that there is underreporting. Many community members are fearful to report to law enforcement or other institutions. So FBI statistics only gather stats that are reports that come from law enforcement, and we know a lot of people are afraid to approach law enforcement.
I tend to not believe some of these overblown stats, because whenever we have groups who are their intent is to gear people toward the way they think, they tend to exaggerate stats. So you can't really have a lot of faith in stats. But I do know that there have been some attacks, for sure.
Well, if you look at, and I'm not the one compiling the stats, I'm citing to you FBI and the LA County Human Relations Commission that cites all communities. So I'm certainly not exaggerating stats, and I deliberately chose government agencies to give you that. So
let's do the 1 in 4. 1 in 4 Muslims in America believe that suicide bombing is necessary at times. I am concerned about that.
Well,
and I think most Americans are.
let's talk about the specifics. Now, the question was asked, can suicide bombing against civilian targets to defend Islam be justified? In that, the overall survey found 1% said it was justified. And if we look into those under 30, it was about 2%. Now, again, any percent is a problem, but we're definitely, it's not, to say a 1 in 4 stat is actually a misrepresentation according to the numbers. And beyond that, what we really should be talking about is that over 80% said it's never justified. Over 80%. And you look at those under 30 years old, and they said about over 70% said it's never justified. So, you know, we have to see that this is actually a positive result. Now, what are we doing about that 1 to 2%?
Let's deal with the positive. How can this be positive? I mean, 1 out of 4. How can that be positive? There is no, I mean, unless we deal with that, there is no positive in that, because I don't think the average person in America would want to go to a mall and one of those 1 out of 4 decide they want to put a strap around them filled with bombs and kill themselves and everybody in the mall. I think that's a great concern to the American people.
Absolutely. Any form of suicide bombing should be a concern to American people. But I'm also trying to put things into perspective, and I don't think 1 to 4 is accurate according to the numbers.
So you think that the Pew Research Center is not correct in its survey?
Pew Research didn't say 1 to 4. Pew Research said 1% found that suicide bombing against civilian targets to defend Islam could be justified. Now, let me say this. Had the question been posed differently, it may have reaped a different result, such as, does Islam justify suicide bombing? And my guess is that that number would have been even lower. So, and I just again to put things into perspective, you know, there was a University of Maryland poll that found that 1 in 2 Americans believed that bombings and other attacks intentionally aimed at civilians are sometimes justified. Now, as you see here, there is, the only word missing here is suicide. We're talking about bombings, and we're talking about perhaps a culture that is comfortable with collateral damage, which is definitely a concern, you know. Now, when we look at the Pew poll again, we look at one of the issues that violence is an issue, definitely. But what I'm trying to point out is that the overwhelming majority said that it is never justified. We're trying to deal with that minority, and what we are doing is we're developing different programs that outreach to Muslim youth and Muslims across the board and engage them in participating in protecting the country and give them an avenue to bring their concerns and engage with those public officials that they have beef with, if you will.
When we, the American people, look at the reality of suicide bombing, in that these people believe that they should give their life to protect their religion, to a point that they're willing to kill their own. You know, we see it happening in Iraq. We see it happening in Israel. They're killing innocent children, you know, the elderly, anybody. Right. And they believe that they're doing the right thing because they have been trained to believe that. And just knowing that 1 out of 4, and I know you're saying that it's not 1 out of 4, but if it's 1 out of whatever, I mean, when I come back from this break, I want you to tell us how should we feel about that and what should we do about it? Because that is a reality out there. We may differ on the numbers, but the reality is there are Muslims living in this country who believe that it's okay to do it. We're going to take a quick break and come back in a moment.
Jesse Peterson is the founder of Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. For information, write P.O. Box 35090, Los Angeles, California 90035, or call 1-800-411-BOND.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I definitely appreciate it. We're talking about the Pew Pew Research Center survey, which highlighted more than 1,000 American Muslims. And it said, and I know we have some dispute about that, but it says 1 in 4 Muslims under 30 believes that suicide bombing are justified under certain circumstances. Let me just say to you, 23 million Muslims in America. 1% of that is 23,000 Muslims. 2% of that is 46,000 Muslims. Should we be afraid?
We should be concerned that there is a problem with suicide bombing being justified. Yes. But I can't go on without saying that the question didn't ask, what are you willing to strap a bomb to your body? Right. The question asked, do you feel that it is in some way justified? Now,
but
again,
if they just ask it in that way and say, yes, I'm willing to do it if they...
Yeah. No, I hear you, but it's a different question. So let's take it for what it says. It says that, do you think it's justified? Not will you do it on your own. So when people are asked, do you think it's justified? Justified means there's, you're asking explanation. Give me an explanation. Is there an explanation or is it not? What is that explanation, and is that explanation justified? Now, that's a different question than are you going to do it? So in terms of being concerned, I wouldn't necessarily be concerned for our safety. I would be concerned for the potential for our safety being compromised. And that's where we come in with countering bad theology with good theology. And Muslims alone have that responsibility, and we shoulder that responsibility. That bad theology can only be countered with good theology, that there is no room for suicide in Islam, that there is no room for the targeting of civilians in Islam, and hence there's no room for suicide bombing in Islam.
I think you make a good point there. I think one of the problems that we don't see hundreds or thousands of Muslims coming out in the public, protesting and denouncing this. And I think because they're so quiet about it, and I recognize your organization is trying to do something about that, but I think because we don't see them out in the public denouncing it, it gives the impression that they agree with it.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but really the problem isn't in the audio, it's in the reception. Because since 9/11, Muslims have been condemning the terrorist attacks against this country and anything following the 7/7 bombings, the Spain bombings. On 9/11, the day of 9/11, my executive director, as well as executive directors of mainstream Muslim American organizations, were in the White House prepared to meet with the president on a different issue. Right. Obviously, that meeting was canceled, but what happened was they produced a condemnation shortly after the attacks, the day of, and put it out. Ever since, and actually, let me back up, prior even to 9/11, Muslims, our organization produced a counterterrorism policy paper to talk about the ways we can effectively fight and counter terrorism in this country. So, and ever since, and beyond, let me say that beyond the condemnations, Muslims have actually put together programs and initiatives to help counter any sort of justification for terrorism. One being the Muslim American Homeland Security Congress, which is an umbrella organization that works alongside Sheriff Lee Baca to ensure that Muslims are playing an active role in protecting the country. Another one is something our organization put together in 2004 or 2003, I can't recall, the National Grassroots Campaign to Fight Terrorism. And so there are definitely, we've gone beyond condemning, and we've put together initiatives. And as a matter of fact, we dedicated an entire annual convention to the theme of countering religious and political extremism. And we put together publications such as Jihad versus Terrorism to put it out there and to talk to our community as well as the broader American public. So unfortunately, it's not resonating as we would like it. But that's why it's so important that to do what you're doing here, which is, to have an American Muslim come on your television station and talk about what we are doing in our community.
The problem with that, and I understand what you're saying, is that most people not, as you just said, most people are not going to hear about the things that you're doing in secret, it seems, even though it's not secret. But if you had a massive rally, as they do in other countries when they want to attack America, if you had a massive rally in America in support of what we are doing to protect this country, I think you would have a greater influence or impact on the American society at large.
let's not be quick to put so much emphasis on a rally, and let's also be understanding that there are many other things going on.
Yeah,
a rally is actually a one-day shot, but programs and initiatives are long-term and require really dedication and perseverance, and that requires more than, you know, a rally, with all due respect. So I think that we shouldn't downplay what's taking place. You know, I think that Muslim Americans have actually done more than, and actually been expected to do more than any other community had another community been in our shoes. And that's fine, and we're bearing the burden, but let's not downplay that.
Another thing that this Pew Research Center survey said, the study found that 28% of respondents do not believe that Arabs were responsible for the 9/11 attack. Another 32% said they did not know. 40% believe that Arabs were responsible. Is that a state of denial in the Muslim community?
Yeah, the 40% of Muslim Americans said Arabs are not behind 9/11, and I think that is certainly a problem. But again, let's put it in perspective.
Is that a state of denial, you think?
It could be denial. It could be disbelief that someone from one's own community could commit this sort of attack. So, you know, I wasn't able to interview those individuals, so I can't speak to the mind state, but I can definitely see that there is a problem here. But let me put this also in perspective.
We
because
have about
there was
4 minutes left in this segment, so
let me cite one quick poll.
Okay.
There was a poll done by Ohio University that also asked a very similar question. The question was, let me tell you the results. 36% of Americans, not Muslim Americans, broader public Americans, believe that it was very likely or somewhat likely that federal officials either participated in attacks or took no action to stop them. So as you can see, the conspiracy theory goes beyond the Muslim community. You know, 36% of the average Americans said that, 40% of Muslims. So we're talking about a 4% difference. So, you know, we cannot. There will be conspiracy theorists, and there will be people who just completely disbelieve that someone from their own could do that. Yeah. So, you know, it's something that we also have to deal with. But
how can we break the control of the extremist?
How do we? I'm sorry.
How do we break that control of the extremists?
It's a very good question, and I think what we do, first of all, is recognize they do not have control of the hearts and minds of the broader Muslim American community, according to this poll. And actually, according to this poll, they don't have the hearts and minds of the broader Muslim public, at least in Europe, because the poll looked at UK and Spain and other parts of Europe. So the main thing that we have to do is amplify the voice of moderate Muslims in this country and beyond, you know, by making sure that we have access to television stations like your own, so we can put out the message that there is no room for extremism or suicide bombing or oppression in Islam, no matter who it's directed against. There's no such thing as infidels, according to Islam. That's not even in the Islamic dictionary, if you will.
But it's in the Quran.
It's not in the Quran.
That Christians and Jews are infidels and worthy of death.
It's interesting that you say that, but it's not in the Quran, and I ask you to read an accurate
I wish
translation,
I had it with me.
And I'll bring you one.
I have one.
Okay.
But, yeah.
There's no word.
I'll have you on my radio show. We
That'd
can talk
be great.
about. We can pick up on that.
That would be great. But so there's no word as infidels in the Quran.
So are you saying that Muslims do not believe that Christians and Jews are infidels?
I'm not saying that Muslims around the world, because we realize there is a fraction of extremists within our community, like there is in every community. But I'm saying that according to the text, the Islamic text, which Muslims believe in across the world, there is no such Muslims and Jews, Christians and Jews are looked at as people of the book and talked about as people of the book in the Quran. And there's an elevated respect towards them because we share a common ancestry of prophethood from Adam to Noah to, you know, Abraham and Moses and beyond.
Should we focus on the moral and spiritual aspect of the Muslim religion? Should there be a focus on that?
I think that there is definitely a role for Muslims to play when it comes to articulating their theology to our own community, right, in the accurate way. So yes, there is a role for the spirituality. Now, is there a role beyond that? Yes, and that role also comes in when we look at government and media and the opportunities that they can create for Muslims to have inroads into making sure that their voices are heard too. Yes. It is when there's hopelessness that people look towards other means of making a change. We need to create avenues for people to make constructive avenues to make positive change.
The reason I ask is because we tend to carry out what we believe in. You know, we live by faith. So whatever we believe in is what we tend to act out or carry out. And Muslims across the world have been taught to die for their belief, you know, to die for their religion.
I don't know if that's accurate across the world. I mean, let's talk about what part of the world you're talking about, because according to the Quran, there is no such thing as dying for your belief. Any scripture can be taken out of context. The Bible was taken out of context as well, right, during the Crusades. And innocent women and children were justified as being killed. Now, according to the extremist, abortion clinics have been bombed.
There's nowhere in the Bible where anyone has used or justified putting bombs on themselves and killing themselves.
No, that's a different, right.
So this is extreme.
They're both extreme. The killing of innocent life
is extreme.
I think they're both. The innocent life should be preserved, period, whether it's yourself or another person.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We're going to pick up on this on the second segment, all right? We are out of time, folks. Let us hear from you. Appreciate your emails. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jesse Lee Peterson. I appreciate your email, folks. Thank you for doing that. We're doing a two-part series on a Pew Research Center survey which highlighted more than 1,000 American Muslims. And I'm talking with Sireen Sawaf. She is the Government Relations Director of Muslim Public Affairs Council, better known as MPAC. Thank you for staying over. We have on the same clothing because we didn't leave the set. Thank you for staying over. No problem. I want to make a correction. I said 23 million Muslims in the U.S. It's 2.3 million Muslims in the U.S.
According to their estimate, yeah.
You think there's more?
Well, DOJ had a different estimate, so I think, you know.
What is their estimate?
DOJ, and this was a few years back, was, if I remember correctly, it was between 4 to 7 million.
Really?
So, you know, it's hard because the U.S. Census Bureau doesn't, you know, poll religion.
I want to talk to you about what you're doing in your community or the Muslim community around this country. But I want to go back to the question I asked before the last show ended. Should we be concerned about, I asked, what are you doing to break the control of the extremists? I believe that's what we ended on.
Yeah, and
what should be done?
I think what we have to realize, first of all, is that they do not have control unless we give them control.
Right.
The way that you strip them of their control is to strip them of using the religion to justify their actions. So the more that we, the broader American public and government and media, use the term Islamic alongside a criminal action like radicalism or Islamic Jihad, then we are justifying and we are amplifying their message. What we need to do is take those two words, break them apart, and say that Islam has nothing to do with radicalism. Islam does have to do with jihad, but jihad is also not defined as the extremists define it. Jihad is defined as a struggle. There's an internal struggle that we all as human beings go through. There's a struggle when you see injustice, you're obligated to speak up, and there is a physical struggle, but it's very constrained into self-defense. And so we have the right to defend ourselves, but it doesn't justify 9/11 or anything of that liking. So I think what we do is we make sure that we're not adding fuel to their fire, but we are stripping them of what they are trying to hijack.
Oh, okay. So the word jihad doesn't necessarily refer to a holy war?
Absolutely not. There's in the Arabic vocabulary, there's nothing called a holy war. Jihad holy war, came from the Crusades, as well as the term infidel.
Okay.
Jihad translates into a struggle, and there is a spiritual struggle, there's a verbal struggle. If you see injustice, you have to speak up against it. We can't stay silent if we're in a position, like in this country, to speak up. We have that right. And there is a physical struggle, but it's limited to self-defense and not harming innocent civilians. And it goes along the rules of engagement, not harming non-combatants and not harming animals or even the environment, and protecting clergy, Jewish, Christian, or beyond that, if they are in the midst of a conflict. So there are a lot of rules of engagement that spell out even how a war should be fought. Definitely not any way that would justify some of the horrible crimes that we're seeing take place today.
Do you or your organization support racial profiling?
Do we support racial profiling? Can you elaborate?
At many of the airports and train stations, bus stations, government buildings, Muslims are looked at in a suspicious way because, as far as I know, unless you can tell me differently, most of the suicide bombing are done by Muslims. I'm right about that, right?
Yes.
And so because of that, there's great concern when we travel in this country. We need to racially profile because of that situation. Are you in agreement with that?
No, I don't think so, because when we limit our profiling to simply the exterior, we're actually not being effective with the way we go about protecting this country. What we need to do is profile behavior, and other countries and other governments do that. When you profile behavior, you won't miss the person who is under the radar. If you look at the profiles of the hijackers of the 19 hijackers of 9/11, none of them necessarily stood out as what one may believe is, the suspect. What we need to do is be smart with our counterterrorism. That doesn't mean racial profiling. That means behavioral profiling.
And I understand that, but with these type of attacks, most of them, if not all, are Muslims, and because of that, there should be a focus on all people. But because of that, there should be a closer focus on Muslims.
Well, again, let's not be so quick to make assumptions. Now, if we focus on Muslims, we're also going to forget that there are other criminals in the midst. We know that there were the attempted homegrown terrorist plot that was foiled by the FBI. People originally thought many of them were Muslim. Some of them went to a church that I cannot recall the name of at this moment. But so we also, again, can't focus on a community. We have to, again, keep our peripheral vision wide.
You support profiling, but not necessarily on one group. It's just everybody should be included.
Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not saying I support profiling. I actually believe, and we're talking about racial profiling, I don't think it's smart. And government officials will say the same thing. We work very closely with the FBI. We meet with them on a regular basis to talk about how to go about protecting this country in a smart way.
But
we do the same with Department of Homeland. They don't think so, and I don't think so.
I can't imagine anyone not thinking that is...
To racially profile.
It's smart. I mean, not necessarily racially profile, but if you have a group of people that carrying out a certain crime, it's like with Black Americans. It is known that crack cocaine is carried out or afforded by poor blacks, right? And so it would be justified to focus on that group, all groups really, but a primary focus on this group that is known to carry out certain acts.
Now, let's put it in context. You're talking about America, and there have been no terrorist attacks after 9/11 in America from Muslim Americans. So we're not necessarily quote
we've been
unquote
careful about it.
We've been careful about it, but at the same, on the other hand of the coin, the FBI has talked to me directly about the importance, and we Muslims, as well as other community groups, Sikhs and Coptic Christians, have sat around the table to talk about how to better their own watch list system. It's not foolproof. And let's talk about the Department of Homeland Security, which is a new creation post 9/11. They're still trying to deal with things internally. So they're creating programs, and they're realizing that they need to focus that so that they're not wasting energy, time, and resources into wastefully profiling people based off race. We need to look at what matters, which is what is suspect. Race is not a factor in being suspect. What is a factor? Because other than, if we were to do that, let's go by the conservative estimate of the Pew poll in terms of Muslims in America, you're talking about 2.35 million Muslims being watched. We don't have the resources to do that. Let's beyond the what's effective and what's not.
It's not personal. It's not like they're profiling a race just because of their race. They're profiling because certain people tend to do certain things, and so the primary profile should be on that group for that certain issue. I want to ask, do you believe
that's by the way not what people in the field, the experts, are saying. But
right, I understand that. They're afraid. But
they're not afraid. They say that it's not effective, and if anyone were to think about
racist.
No, they're not. I mean, if they say it in a skillful way, they've said that it's simply impossible to do that. If we were to look at World War II and the internment of the Japanese, they were a smaller community, and people have said it's actually physically impossible to intern 2.35 or whatever the number is of Muslims. So beyond what's politically correct, it's not smart, and we don't have the resources to do it. And that's not how we catch the criminals.
Don't you think we should put safety first?
I totally agree with you. There is no doubt that we need to uphold the security of our country.
Right.
And that is exactly why we are meeting with the FBI on a regular basis, as well as Department of Homeland Security, as well as the State Department and the Pentagon, to think of ways to enhance our security in a smart way, that doesn't go about it in a way that is getting the innocent people caught up in it.
And I believe it was New Jersey or Philadelphia, forgive me for not remembering the city, I should. There was an arrest of about 6 men who attempted to destroy Fort
Dix.
3 of those men were illegals. Do you think we need to close the borders, put a fence around the borders of the United States of America, shut it down?
It's interesting because the immigration debate is quite heated in Washington right now, and there's different legislation that is trying to come to a middle ground to satisfy both the left and the right and come up with an effective immigration policy. Is building a fence necessarily that? I don't think that they're saying that. I think
what are you saying? Do you think we should?
I don't know.
Your organization, your group.
I don't know.
Do you think we should put a fence around the border?
Our organization hasn't put out a statement on that, but I can tell you that I don't know if a fence is going to protect the country. What we need to do is come up with, again, effective immigration policy, and that's going to take time and energy, and it's not simply going to happen with a fence.
Why? Well, no, we need more than just a fence, but the fence would definitely stop it. For a while.
You think that a fence would stop people from coming to America?
Of course.
I don't think that.
They would do other things as well, but the fence is the primary thing that we need. Why don't you believe that? So you don't think we should put a fence there?
I don't think a fence is the answer. I think, again, we're talking about Band-Aid approaches. If we really want to deal with immigration,
what do you think we should do?
We need to come up with ways that that deal with our present status. Right now, there are many people who are undocumented in this country.
Right.
What are we going to do, and how do we do it in a way that doesn't tear apart families? And,
I want to
how do we
respond to that.
deal?
Let me take a quick break. We're at a break, and we'll come back and let you finish that.
Sure.
We'll be back in a moment.
Jesse Peterson is the founder of Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny. For information, write P.O. Box 35090, Los Angeles, California 90035, or call 1-800-411-BOND.
Welcome back, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Before we went to break, and I'm moving fast here, so the folks will watch here. You don't think we should put a fence around the borders? Even some of the guys that attacked us on September 11th had come into the country illegally. The borders are wide open. Better protection now because of the outcry of the American public. But I can't understand why you wouldn't believe a fence would be of good service to us.
I was saying that I don't think a fence is an answer. I think a fence may be a Band-Aid approach. Again, when we look at immigration policy, we have to come up with effective policy. Policies like the CLEAR Act that was proposed in Congress, CLEAR Act that would mandate that local law enforcement act as federal law enforcement and enforce immigration policy,
yes,
was opposed by law enforcement because they said, you are taking us away from our primary job, which is to protect the streets. I don't want to be involved in enforcing immigration law. I want to make sure that if there's a crime, I'm there to be to protect the people, the innocent civilians.
Don't you think that's dumb?
No, I think that there's a role cut out for every job. We can't be doctors and lawyers all at the same time. We need somebody to cure a disease, and we need somebody to also to fight for civil rights. They're two separate roles. So I think that law enforcement, again, these are the experts in the field, say that that legislation in particular wasn't an effective and intelligent way to go about immigration law.
Let me give you my idea.
Same thing.
As a regular guy, common sense man,
sure,
I think we should close the borders, enforce the laws, immigration law, legal and illegal immigration laws. I think we should deport. I think that businesses who are employing these folks should be fined for their action. And I think if those laws are enforced, we could save the American people. We could save lives in this country. We can solve this illegal immigration problem. Doesn't it sound like common sense?
No, I don't want to get too much into immigration law because, quite honestly, I'm not the expert. But again, I'm talking about really thinking of ways to be effective with what we do.
Right.
If we lay out a policy that is not enforceable, it's not going to happen. What we need to do is come up with policies and bills and laws that actually are manageable and doable.
And I just don't have that in this country. We have the laws there, but the lawmakers are not enforcing the laws.
Now, actually, more of them are. There have been more deportations post 9/11 than there were prior to 9/11. So there is more enforcement. And again, we need to deal with the laws we currently have, like you said, before we come up with all these theoretical laws.
Yeah. There are a lot of angry Black Americans in this country. They've been brainwashed, dumbed down, and demoralized. They've been turned away from their own country. They call themselves African Americans. They're very angry at America. They're very angry at white Americans. The FBI analysis reported that Al-Qaeda is successfully or aggressively recruiting Black Americans into their organization. What's your opinion about that?
It's interesting, I haven't come across that data, but I think that what we need to do is outreach to people who are feeling disenfranchised, whether it's historically disenfranchised or present day, rather than, again, it's a fight, it's a struggle to win the hearts and minds of people. Is Al-Qaeda going to win them, or are we, the mainstream, the moderate, going to win them? We all collectively share a role in that as Americans. What we need to do is, rather than marginalize and alienate communities, bring them into our midst and engage them and show them avenues in which they too can engage those people that are officially there to represent them.
Yeah, I've always been concerned about this, or for a long time, because a lot of Black men are ended up in jail, prisons around the country, and they are angry. It's not justified, but they are angry. And many of them are leaving the Christian religion because they've been told that Christianity is the white man's religion and that Islam is the black man's religion. And they're being deceived. We saw an incident last year, I believe, or the year prior, where some black guys got together in Florida and tried to carry out a terrorist act. And so I think that if we don't be honest with black Americans and tell them that they need to get over their anger and stop hating their country, we are going to see more of them joining these groups, and it's going to be harder to detect them because they don't look like the normal terrorists that we're accustomed to seeing. It's a dangerous trend that's coming about.
Well, again, then that we would solve that problem by not profiling race, but we would do it by profiling behavior. So the FBI, which they are in the business of doing, would look at they would define suspicious and suspect according to what they're seeing, the actions and the inclinations to commit violent acts. So I don't think we would have a problem if we didn't enforce racial profiling, but rather we did what I'm actually pushing for, which is behavioral profiling, which is the effective way. So I don't think that would be an issue.
Because of time, define behavior for me.
Behavioral profiling, from what we understand, examples of that would be, for example, somebody having unmatching documents. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're, obviously automatically terrorist, but if their driver license doesn't match another identifying document, then that might raise a red flag. If they are panicking and uncomfortable in the airport and they're sweating and they're hurrying to get on a plane for a reason, and they don't have luggage, and they're not making they're not communicating with people when trying to enter depart from the country or depart from the state, maybe that too would raise a red flag. There are different kinds of things that would raise a red flag, not to the average citizen, because you and I aren't in the business of detecting suspicious. It should raise it, of course, to those people who are the professionals in the field, who are employed by the government to protect this country. So that's what I mean.
Tell us what you're doing on the Muslims. You're doing in the Muslim community in order to change the impression that Americans have upon your community?
Well, we've done several things. One thing we did was we developed our own campaign, our national grassroots campaign to fight terrorism, that really gives mosques and other institutions a way that they can participate too in protecting the country, the community, and the institution itself. Okay. And that is, number one, by reinforcing the religious ideology that there is no room whatsoever for terrorism or extremism in Islam. Number two, it would be to encourage Muslims to institutions and mosques to understand what's taking place in their mosques. Mosques are very open environments. We don't have membership rosters necessarily. So, to understand who's meeting in the mosque and for what purpose, to know who's going to deliver the sermon and have an idea of their background so that the mosque environment, the open environment, doesn't get hijacked. Number three is to encourage partnership and communication between their local law enforcement and their own institution so that they can develop those tools to be able to detect suspicious behavior and distinguish that from what may be cultural behavior, So that's one program. Another one is something that not just MPAC, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, but other organizations, Muslim American organizations, have come together to do, put together, which is the Muslim American Homeland Security Congress. Right. It is an umbrella organization that's not just made up of Muslim organizations, but also educational institutions, mosques, civic and political organizations, to kind of come up with ways to put flat out on paper that, again, this is the ideology. There's no room for terrorism or suicide bombing. And be proactive with that. So there are initiatives in place, and beyond that, we continue to engage with government officials, with media outlets such as your own, and with interfaith groups, and participate in interfaith dialogues.
I was going to ask, do Muslims fellowship with Christians and Jews in this country? They get
absolutely.
Together?
There are wonderful programs that many of which we're a part of. The Muslim Jewish program that was recently launched is called New Ground, and it's a partnership between MPAC, our organization, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and the PJA, the Progressive Jewish Alliance, which brings Muslims and Jews together and tells that and allows them the safe space to talk about local projects and roll their sleeves up and work on ways to help better their local communities and still address the elephant in the room in terms of what's taking place in the Middle East and be very honest and be very civic and civil about it. There's also many interfaith dialogues. Just this week, I was part of a meeting with the Abrahamic Peace Initiative with different members across the board in the Christian and Catholic tradition, as well as Jewish community rabbis, to talk about ways to, again, bring peace within our own communities.
How do you personally feel about the attack upon Israel? There is an attempt to literally, by the Muslim extremists, to literally wipe Israel off the map. How do you feel about that?
I think that, our organization has spelled out a very clear, hopeful plan that would allow for peace to be in the region. We recognize the right for Israel to exist alongside the right for Palestine to exist. So we believe in a two-state solution, one in which each group would have their own autonomy and would have control over their own region. What we are seeing now is not that case, but we're pushing and promoting a two-state solution.
The reality is that Israel cannot make peace with these folks because they don't want peace. They don't necessarily want land. They just want Israel gone.
I think that might
Israel be everything they've asked for, they've received, and it's just not enough because they want them dead. And my concern, I think many of the American people concerned, is because of our support for Israel, and that we are a Christian nation, that if they're allowed to get in here, they're going to do the same thing to us.
Well, let me. You said a lot right there. So I think it's actually inaccurate to say that they want them dead and they want them wiped off the map.
Why do you think that?
Because if we look at history,
they just
we know
gave them the
that
Gaza Strip,
in 1947. Prior to 1947, and we know, by the way, that Muslims and Jews throughout history have lived peacefully alongside each other. As a matter of fact, for 400 years in Spain, under Muslim leadership, was when the Jewish community flourished in what they called the Golden Age. So, there is a long history of peaceful coexistence. Now, when we talk about the region itself, Israel and the Palestinian territories, it's not accurate to say that that Palestinians simply hate the Israelis for what they do. There are many groups actually that come to America, Jews and Palestinians and Christian Palestinians as well as Muslim Palestinians, to talk about all the nonviolent, peaceful events and activities that are taking place over there. Yeah. So let's not overstate that there is a huge problem. I mean, there is definitely a problem, but actually the responsibility cuts on both ends.
You have to admit that there is a radical aspect of the Muslim Palestinians who want to wipe out Israel. Maybe not all the folks, but there is an aspect of it that simply want to wipe them off the map.
There is aspects on both sides. There are Israelis who believe that I was told to my face by a Jewish American here in Los Angeles that there should be no Palestine and there's no such thing as Palestinians. And it wasn't the first time I heard it.
I'm sure you can find
you can definitely find extremists in all ends.
In Israel, you don't have an extremist group that is going after the Palestinians, trying to just wipe them off the map.
There are Jewish community members in Israel that say there are extremists that are trying to wipe out Palestinians. So again, you have extremism on both sides. What we need to do, again, is come up with a peaceful, viable solution to the problem. That's not going to happen from favoring one state over another. It's going to happen when we, as America, go back to our own values and come up with peaceful, humanitarian, and reasonable, viable solution. That would be a two-state solution with justice on both ends.
Thank you for coming on with me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was nice.
Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.